Hi everyone, Cheryl here. Thanks for stopping by my YouTube channel. Today I want to share a Halloween card with you that I am using MFT stamps, which will use the candy and some distress oxide inks to make a fun background. I didn't show you the coloring. I did that already. I did it off camera and then I decided to film how to do the background and then the card assembly. So this video doesn't show you the coloring, but I do show you how to make the fun background for this card and put it all together. So what you see me doing right now is just kind of getting an idea for where I want everything to be arranged on the front of the card, and I think I'm pretty happy with this layout so far. It does change a little bit in the end, but I kind of took a mental image of that and set the pieces aside, and now I'm going to get to ink blending. So I have a A2 sized card base, Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and Distress Oxide inks from Ranger Tim Holtz. And here I'm just showing you that I keep my ink sponges velcroed to the back of the ink pads when I'm done with them, and so I always have them handy whenever I go to use my ink blending. I have like 4 different daubers that I use, and I just trade out the sponge when I trade out the colors. So it keeps them pure that way, and you don't have any weird blending happening when you don't want it. So I'm starting with some Twisted Citron, and I'm going to go to my Lucky Clover next, and I realize it's a brand new stamp, so I don't have an ink sponge for that yet, which I go grab and add to it. So here's Lucky Clover, coming down a little bit darker than I had intended, so I'm trying to blend off those harsh lines with the Twisted Citron a bit more, and then I'm going to move on to Faded Lilac here, and also a new stamp, and I didn't have a sponge for it, so I had to go grab that. So here what I'm doing is using a Post-it note to protect the paper from my fingerprints, because the oxide inks stay wet for quite a while, so you want to make sure you don't get your fingerprints all over it. And so I use the Post-it note and turn it upside down so it sticks to my fingertips and not the paper, and then it just acts as a protective coating. Here I got a little bit of green down there that I'm trying to cover up, so, and I go back in with the Lucky Clover quite a bit to blend out that bright green, but I think I got it okay. And then I take some black soot, and I'm going to make a little bit of a night sky effect here. I'm just going to do right around the edges a little bit. It's really strong, and so a little bit goes a long way. And then I kind of mute that back a little bit with my Blueprint Sketch ink. So here I have the finished panel, and I'm going to do some distress water reaction to it. So you sprinkle water on it, the oxide inks, and it reacts to it, and when you sop it up, you're left with kind of a white area where the ink has been released from the paper and sopped up. So wherever there's a water splatter is going to be kind of a white splotch, which gives it kind of a Starry Night feel. And then I'm just flicking clean water, and then I'll mop it up with a paper towel, and there you have this cool splotchy effect. It's very random. Then I come in with some black ink and do the same thing. I used enamel accents by mistake. It should have been my black acrylic paint, but I just grabbed the wrong bottle, and I didn't realize it until I was editing this video that I had the wrong product. But it worked. It watered down just fine and splattered just like black acrylic paint would splatter. So I'm happy with it. At first I thought, oh, that's way too much black, but I really like how it came out in the end. So I just splatter a little bit more and try not to overdo it. A little bit goes a long way. And then I'm going to clean up my mess and try not to spill my coffee. And then I'm going to heat set it, make sure it's good and dry. Okay, so now I'm ready to put the card together, and I'm just trying to decide which frame die I want to use. And the one I end up going with is this MFT Stitch Rectangular Frame Die from MFT Stamps, and I use this a lot. I just like the finished look it gives my cards. It just kind of frames it out nicely. And I'm realizing that I don't have as much room as I thought I had with my original plan, so I'm going to end up leaving a couple of the components out, but I end up putting them on the inside of the card later. So here I have I've die cut two of the frame dies, one from craft foam and one from black cardstock, and the craft foam is just going to get layered onto the black cardstock frame for dimension. And I love using craft foam for that, especially when it involves being able to use a die to cut it, because it matches up perfectly and it adds just the right amount of dimension without being too high, and you don't have to go through all of the die cutting 4 and 5 pieces and stacking them all together. The craft foam just works nice for me, so I use that a lot. So I'm using some Lawn Fawn glue tube glue, which I love. I've tried several brands. This one I just seem to keep coming back to. The applicator end doesn't seem to gunk up, and I don't know, I just like the Lawn Fawn glue. So, and then my brother printed me that glue tube holder with his 3D printer, which I love. Comes in handy. The other tool that I love that I would die without are my tweezers, and I have probably 4 pair of tweezers on my desk, and these are inexpensive ones that I got from Amazon. I think I got like a set of 8 from Amazon that have a couple of different types of ends to them. One is a curved end, and some are as a flat, a blunt end. But anyway, I'm lost without my tweezers. I use them religiously throughout the card making process. Okay, so I have all the pieces glued down now, and I need to add a sentiment. And I struggled with this because I couldn't really find a good place to put the sentiment, but I felt like it needed it, and then I thought, well, no, I won't put it in there. In the end, I decided to put it on the front and cover a little bit of her hat, which I'll show you in just a second. Sorry, I'm off camera here. I think I bring it back up. There we go. So I'm using the Halloween Greetings sentiment, and I'm going to heat emboss it with white embossing powder. And I can't remember if I prepped it already, but if I didn't, you'll see here in a second. Yeah, there I go. So this is my embossing bag, powder bag, which I also love. It is a little bit messy because it releases a lot of powder, but in my mind, more is better in that respect. So I'm just rubbing my hand over the stamp to season it a little bit because it's a brand new stamp, and sometimes the new stamps resist the ink a little bit and it kind of beads up. So if you run your hand over it, that tends to make that receive the ink better. So I'm going to use my Brutus Monroe white, superfine white embossing powder, which is also my favorite. I've tried a couple different brands, and the trick for me is getting the superfine because just the regular white embossing powder tends to be a little too granular and it kind of shows up chunky. So it's also important to not overheat your white embossing powder because it will like dissipate almost and not be a really bright white. So don't overheat it. And then here I'm just trimming it down, and I eyeball it. I usually don't measure when it comes to trimming the sentiment strips. Sometimes I'll put a pencil mark where I think it needs to go, but I'm pretty good at eyeballing things from a dimensional standpoint. And then I'm going to fuss her a little bit with where I think it should go. I cut out a lot. I spent like 2 minutes trying to figure out the best place for the sentiment. I cut all that video out, so I didn't need to bore you with it, but in the end I end up putting it across some of her hat. It's hard for me to cover up some of the Copic coloring because you spend so much time coloring images, you don't want to cover it up, but I think this was the best place for it. So I'm going to put some foam tape squares on the back to pop it up so that it's even with the frame. And the foam tape squares that I'm using are the same height or thickness as the craft foam I used to pop up the frame, so it matches nicely. Okay, so I'm just going to put this down, and again, I eyeball it. I think I stood up to stand over it, yeah. And it felt a little crooked to me, so I'm going to pull it back up. Yep. Attempt to do that without destroying the card. And oh look, I put it down in the exact same spot. Sometimes I am too much of a perfectionist. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to trim down just a hair off of every side of the background panel. And I'm doing this because it will give it just the tiniest little white border, not white border, black border, when I mount it to the card base. And I just think it makes it pop a little bit more. So just shaving a hair off each end. And again, not measuring at all, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And plus it makes the edges nice and clean too. After you've been ink blending and everything, it kind of just cleans up everything. So I'm going to stick this down. I'm going to use my Atg Tape Runner. And I have a love-hate relationship with this thing because you can get cartridges, to replacement tape cartridges that don't release properly, and I don't know how else to explain it. Sometimes it's like the glue is on the wrong side of the tape, and so I struggle. Sometimes I just have to throw it away and start over, but I actually found a YouTube video that explains how to do it when that happens, because apparently it's quite common. But so now that I have figured out that, I use it religiously, but at first with replacing the cartridge on that ATG gun was a lot of heartache. But I love it now, so. Okay, so I get that down nice and straight, and I'm pretty happy with it, and I think I'm going to show you next what I do with the inside. Yeah, cute, huh? Okay, so I grabbed a pre-cut A2 sized panel. About once a month I just take an hour or so and I cut a bunch of 110 Nina White cardstock down into quarters, and then I grab a handful of my various different rectangle dies and I pre-cut them so that I have inserts ready to go for my cards, because I always put an insert in, especially if I use colored card bases, I put an insert in. And then here I'm just adding the extra 2 components that didn't make it to the front of the card. I like to tie some sort of creative element to the inside as often as I can. Sometimes I'm in a rush and I don't, but when I have leftover pieces like this, or sometimes I will use like the similar stamp that was on the front and just kind of run it off the corner on the inside of the card base. It looks pretty. So here I have the little cute frog, and there was no sentiment in the set that said ribbit, like what a frog says, but they did have this cute little stamp that says boo, so my frog is saying boo instead of ribbit, but I thought it turned out pretty cute. And there you have it. So yeah, I really like how this card turned out. I can't wait to send it. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I would appreciate a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you would like to stay on top of new videos that I have coming out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.